Hi everyone, bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue, welcome on Zoom, YouTube, or in person to Concordia University's fourth space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Jogé, Montreal. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion examining the possibilities and limitations of using artificial intelligence to create art. Imagine Deconstructing AI Art is the third event in a series that's been put on by the Applied AI Institute here at Concordia University. And I should note, if you're interested in catching up on their past events, head on over to our Fourth Space YouTube channel for those recordings. The AI Institute coordinates AI research across Concordia's 4 faculties, encouraging multidisciplinary, socially responsive collaborations. AI2's next event will be on April 17th, so please put that in your calendars. On April 17th, we will be exploring AI governance in Canada, specifically in relation to Bill 27. So we do invite you to sign up for their newsletter, stay informed and up to date with upcoming events. So once again, welcome to Fourth Space. What do we do here at Fourth Space? Well, we work with our university community to mobilize and exchange knowledge by co-creating daily activities, conversations, podcasts, panel discussions, workshops, hackathons, etc. It's our pleasure to welcome in our special guest panel of speakers here today and audience members who are joining us remotely or in person. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to Bettina Forget, whose research examines the recontextualization of art and science, and right before this panel guided us through the process of creating our own AI-generated art pieces. So thank you so much for that, Bettina. We will let all of the panelists introduce themselves. Bettina will be, I think, acting as a very gentle moderator here during this conversation. So I'll just let you know, for audience members, if you'd like to jump in, just raise a hand and we'll get a mic to you so that the folks on Zoom can hear you. And if you're joining us on Zoom, you're more than welcome to raise a virtual hand and we'll call upon you if you have something to say. Otherwise, the chat is, of course, activated. Okay, that's it for me. Over to you, Bettina. Welcome.
Welcome and welcome to this wonderful panel. This is a wish fulfillment for me. When I chatted with Lindsay about putting together a panel on AI and art, I realized that there are a lot of things to explore. I have started to work with AI art, like I think quite a few of you around this table, and bumped against the wonderful possibilities of AI that AI affords us in our creative practice. But of course, there are critical issues that we also have to deal with, and the Applied AI Institute looks at that connection between AI and society. I find that a lot of the AI generators are created by technological specialists, and not enough artists are part of the conversation, and it's important that we shape what AI is and that how it is contextualized and how it is used by those artists. If we are going to make images and create visual culture, then it is important that we're part of this conversation. So let's have a conversation. Do we just want to go around the table first so we know who is here? Do you want to start, Zeph, and just start introducing yourself?
Hello, it's on, good. I'm Zeph Thibodeau. I'm a PhD student at Concordia University in the Individualized program. And my studies center around human-machine relationships, that is to say social relationships between humans and machines. I work a lot with robots, but last fall, I guess, when all these image generators started to come out, I found it very fascinating. And then I had the chance to co-teach a course with Fenwick over there on critical engagement with AI, which involved presenting the image generators that we were seeing to basically a non-technical group of students, which was really fascinating for these reasons of including more than just technical voices in the conversation. And of course, the image generators came out right as soon as that course started, so the whole course became centered around them. And it's been very juicy in terms of things to talk about. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, that's who I am and a little bit about my context.
Okay, Lynn. Hello, Lynn.
So my name's Lynn Hughes. I'm emeritus professor in studio arts. It's maybe a little bit misleading because I've spent most of my more recent time at Concordia involved with art and tech. So co-founding things like Hexagram and the Games Research Center, TAG, and milieu. I have a graduate degree in history and philosophy of science and technology, specifically math, history and philosophy of math. And specific to AI, I guess it was probably last summer, I'm not sure, or sometime before, just before that, not so long ago, I authored a small book in French for school-age kind of young adults on creating with AI, right before ChatGPT 3 and Midjourney, so it now has to all be updated. Anyway, that's me.
Hi, I'm Michael Malafon. I'm in studio arts photography, a candidate, MFA candidate. And yeah, I started getting into AI text to image generation last semester. I'm really interested in it from the perspective of a photographer. I think of when the camera first came out and how that was like quite a splash in the art world. And I think this new technology is also like making headlines, making waves, and I think it's changing our relationship. Well, it's changing my own relationship to the camera and to my photography. And I'm kind of interested in querying this technology because I do see it as a very straight kind of technology that's, you know, it's being developed by largely, like what you said, Bettina, people in tech. And, you know, when we talk about, or when we see these people who are working these jobs, it's mostly white, straight, cis perspectives. And so that's, I mean, that's something that I think we can talk about later. But when I first started using this technology, I was really interested in exploring, as I am also interested in exploring in my photography, I'm interested in depictions of men and masculinity. And this technology enables me to approach that subject in similar ways, but also like different ways than I can with a camera.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for having me, Bettina. My name is Harley Smart. I'm a publisher at Antism Books. I've been publishing on the topic of generative AI in the arts for about 8 years, and I'm just completing the Design and Computation Arts Master's Program here at Concordia. So in that program, I've been looking at how foundation models, so language models and diffusion models can be integrated into an independent publishing practice. I'm also looking at how they can be used for creativity or extending creativity. And I think a good way of looking at it, way that I've looked at these models is a sort of a chance operation and comparing these to perhaps like oblique strategies that we may have used previously in the arts. So yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Bonjour, hello, my name is Cynthia Girard-Renard, and I'm associate professor in studio arts and painting. I'm a painter and a poet, and I do interdisciplinary artworks, and I know nothing of AI. And I think that's why I've been invited. And up to now, I was not very curious about it. I had some ideas, I saw some software, but I'm happy to be here and to think about it. Very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. And you're right. When we put this panel together, I was really insistent that we have somebody here who does not have a tech background and who has a studio practice. Because if AI is going to impact the art world the way I think it will, I wonder how your relationship with AI will develop if you're going to be seduced into it, because I looked at your work and it's you do installation work, sculptural pieces. I find that you're centering on poetry and materiality. So now that you had a chance in the hour before we have this chat to play a little bit with Midjourney, are you intrigued? Do you feel that this is going to be relevant to your life?
Not yet. I find it kind of tacky.
Okay.
The illustrative part of it, I find it a bit tacky. And the thing, like, I get a lot of email friends telling me, AI, look at AI, they do so wonderful painting, you're done. And that's what people think I did. And then I say, but I'm not doing an image, a flat image on a screen. There's materiality in every brush stroke as a body, as time and space. So up to now, I didn't see something which was really like turning my guts into like excitement, because it's still up to me, it's still very much image as for painters, but they do wonderful posters. They would do wonderful posters.
Yeah, and I echo exactly your sentiment. We read a lot of headlines. This is the end of artistic practice. All graphic designers can go home. We no longer need artists, but it's making AI, these prompt to image generators are making a specific kind of art. They're making illustrative art. And we had a little bit of chat as we were playing, because one of the participants asked, like, what is this good for? I was like, yes, I can't remember, I think you, Michael, or I think that you said you make assets for games and you can make illustrations with it, but it's not going to be an immersive installation experience. We can't yet make 3D objects. I'm saying yet. We can already make videos. So we moved into the moving image for sure, but Michael, I looked at your website, of course, as well. Great photographs, and I see you had a different tab with your AI art, and there was an interesting interplay between the kind of lyrical realism of your photography and the images that you're creating. You're using DALL-E, which is not like Midjourney, which is more painterly. DALL-E, I find this has a more like hard edge photographic vibe to it. Is that why you chose DALL-E?
Yeah, so originally, when I first started using the AI generators, I think I started with Stable Diffusion, I think, and I first ended up using as my prompts, because it's strange, like when you're faced with like putting a prompt in, I think some people mentioned like it's hard to come up with something. And so when I first started doing it, I was actually copy pasting titles from porn videos, gay porn videos, because I thought, one, it would be interesting, but two, like because these generators have like a anti-violence, anti-sexual, what's the word, like guidelines. I wanted to see kind of like how the language could get around that, and also like the words from these porn titles. I mean, this is maybe like getting off topic, but there's like a nuance to words that we use in these titles, and like it was interesting like what would come up with these titles. And so I started with that, and I just started using the different generators until I landed on DALL-E. And yeah, I think the reason why I was attracted to DALL-E was for its, I guess there is like a more like of a photorealism than Midjourney, which is more graphic, illustrative. And what really sold me with DALL-E was when I started using like many prompts, like run on kind of like not even a sentence, but just like adding like prompts, like commas and prompts and commas and prompts. And the more I kind of added to it, the more the image kind of became abstracted and like painterly, and I was really attracted to it for that, because that was something that I think in my photography I tried to do, because I'm not interested in photorealism, basically, even in photography. So what DALL-E gave me was kind of like what I've always wanted to make in a photo. So when I first started making these images, I was actually really excited. And then the more I kind of made them, the more boring they also got at the same time. There's like a weird thing with like I like what you said, Cynthia, about it being tacky, because I think that's kind of yeah, like that's a great word to describe the images that come out of it. Just like a redundancy after a while, and everything kind of like looks the same after a while. But
yeah, and I think you're making a good point, because the images that are being generated are calibrated to exactly represent your prompt and not create an artistic work of art, because I don't think that's what the designers were trying to prove. Normally in art making, there's meaning. When we as artists making images, it has context, there's a research question, but the images that we're getting back from AI are only that. They're stripped of all context, and they just give you, David Bowie as Dracula in the manga style, which we just did earlier and came out great. But it was just basically a game to see if Midjourney could do it, but it has no meaning, right?
Yeah. So now I feel like I'm kind of asking myself. I'm looking at this technology more as a tool in my tool belt, and I'm kind of experimenting how to implement it into my practice, and kind of like how I can take these images, but like how can I further it? How can I push them? I've experimented with like collage, using these images and mixing them with my photography, because I think there is a relationship between photography and these images, and that's something worth exploring, I think.
Yeah, and that's cool. Like, everyone here is a pioneer because the technology is so new, right? Lynn, are you using it at all in your game design?
No.
Or in your creative practice, or in what you're teaching?
No, I'm tracking it a lot, so I spend a lot of time making sure I understand it. I'm not saying I completely understand it, but I think I understand it technically to a fairly decent extent. And I look at a lot of AI art and think about it. Right now, I'm not tempted to, for all kinds of reasons. But I just wanted to add to what Michael was saying. I think for me, another way of saying that is that there's a confusion between art and technique, tools, or craft. Craft, in a way, is a much thicker word for me, but craft is also philosophically different from art. So craft is looking to do technical things, to preserve certain things that are usually technical things that we've learned, whether they're material technical things or less material technical things. Art is a conversation that people have been having with each other for a very long time, and it will continue to be that. So I mean, a lot of the confusion and the hype in the press about, it's all over for art, assumes that it's about technique, that, here's a machine that can draw an amazing, whatever it is, or paint like somebody or other. And so we don't need artists. Artists will disappear because the technical stuff is all solved by the machine, but it's not a technical enterprise art. It uses technique to a greater or lesser extent. Like, I often think about Malevich's White Square, one of the most important art pieces probably you could think of, with very little, technical prowess. At least that's not the point, right? Even if there was some. So that was just something I wanted to say, because I think there's just so much basic confusion out there about the difference. I think it's interesting to speculate about machines doing art for each other, and of course, machines doing art for each other are machines making art for each other. It's a different sector. It's maybe a very interesting sector, but it's not quite the same sector. It has to do also with the word, right? And there's also a lot of confusion because machine-made, let's say a Midjourney thing or a DALL-E, Stable Diffusion image, or anything done by a machine can be music, writing, can be confused when it's received as being, in other words, from the audience end, not the creation end. It looks like somebody made it, or it sounds like somebody could have made it. That's not the same thing as somebody having made it for a reason at a certain time in a certain place to talk about a certain thing in a community of artists, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a human endeavor and not a technical one.
Yeah, and I think you raised a good point about the relationship between art and labor and how it's perceived by the public. that I don't know how many artists here and in the room and online are being asked, how long did it take you to make it, as though it was a relevant question. So if you are no longer performing the labor as the artist, are you now rendered irrelevant? So these are all, I always say there's this trope that the Inuit have 30 words for snow. We need 30 words for art because there's so many ways of creating images or music or sculptures or words for different reasons in different contexts. And this is now a new context in which images are being generated. And the reason I think it's so important to talk about is because it looks human-made, and it's going to impact the visual culture and how we read images. And these machines have not been trained to understand what images mean, because that comes from the humans. So when we're teaching art and when we're creating art, we're teaching a general public and how to engage with AI-created imagery. And I want to just share my screen now, because I want to talk about keynote unknown. Well, I don't know if this is going to work. Okay, so this is the one thing I didn't test earlier. I'm just going to not hold up the conversation, but I want to talk a little bit about bias and how these images are being generated. I'm wired up. So how are you thinking about where these images come from? Because, and this was also a conversation we had as we were playing with Midjourney and at the computer. How does an AI know what a woman looks like, what a banana looks like, what a sensual koala looks like? So where do these images come from? And there is a website called Have I Been Trained, where you can check that out. And have you tested or sort of critically thought about what these AI generators are based on and tested the edges of that? I think, maybe a publication on this. Why don't you take a stab at it while I try to make my screen work?
All right, thank you. So let me see. Yeah, definitely a huge question is like the data sets that are being used, the artworks that are going into these models, and it's just massive amounts. Like the companies that are building these systems are scraping like vast quantities of images across the internet, and that includes tons and tons of artists' works, but also just also machine images and huge swaths of images that aren't necessarily art. So I'd say it's humanly impossible to go through all this. It's very difficult at the scale now. Perhaps in the future, though, gradually these systems will be easier to train on smaller amounts of data where they could be curated. The questions around that are like, well, who's to curate this? And who's to say what goes into these models, first of all? So there's like some sticky questions around like bias in choosing that data set. So right now it is quite wide open and they're scraping very large data sets. So from a publications perspective, I mean, yeah, it is very important. There's a lot of questions around copyright, or a lot of unanswered questions around copyright right now, and how to use output, whether language or image, and who the copyright holder is on this content. And currently it's not possible to copyright this type of work in Canada. So images, I mean, citing as a contributor in a thesis or a paper is not possible, but likewise for images, it's not applicable at the moment in copyright law. But in my own practice, I should just fill you in. I had my thesis show here. It was incredible. I love the space. But I used GPT-3. I fine-tuned GPT-3 model on artist books. So I loaded tons and tons of descriptions of what artist books could be. I scraped catalogs from the MoMA. I wrote my own. I modified different text inputs, and I generated new artist book descriptions, which I would then go into the studio and build. So that was kind of the angle I came into it, as like a research method. And then I started using diffusion models to illustrate some of the output too, because I started generating entire books with text, and be like, okay, well, now I'll use the diffusion model. And this was the early mini Hugging Face, so the DALL-E 1, and right before DALL-E 2 came out, so I didn't foresee that. But I was concerned right away. I was thinking like, okay, well, I see that you can start adding in names of artists. And I was thinking, well, I felt a bit strange about like starting to name like friends or known artists, you know? And I started looking to public domain, so copyright free or public domain content. So for example, I did one book where it was text from The Great Gatsby combined with some illustrators' work from the 1920s, for example, and thinking about like how we can use public domain content for testing and perhaps in like an artistic practice when you're not too sure. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I think publication is really difficult right now with this technology, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually, sorry, switch myself back on. That's actually also something I wanted to touch upon, that whole question of ethics and copyright, of using somebody else's creative work as a prompt. There are programmers, developers who are using specific artists as training models. So the way you train a model is that actually a human being inputs data and tells the model, like, this is what I want you to look at, this is the good data, this is the bad data, this is ugly, this has copyright watermarks on it, we don't want that. And then you have this wonderful data set that may look like a certain artist. And then for that artist, is that work even still your own? And other work is being created that looks like a really crappy version of that beautiful body of work, your oeuvre. So I personally never use another artist as a prompt, but it doesn't make me a better person because I still use AI. It's a dance with the devil. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that sort of tension between using an AI, knowing what that entails and how much these images are sort of expropriated from artists. Any thoughts? Zeph, maybe?
Sure, I could try. Well, I think a lot of this comes, in terms of ethics, comes down to the data sets, as you were saying, was that these, I might call them machine creatures, you feed them a certain diet, and then over the course of this training of their lifespans, they mature into a creature that's capable of, when prompted, producing something that resembles what it has been fed. And it seems from my experience playing around with these algorithms and in the class that we were teaching, is that it's only like all the biases that are inside of it, all of the ethical sticking points, or at least the grand majority of them, I can't say they're all there, is coming from the biases that are in the data that gets fed into the system. So then the fact that there are models that are using existing artists' work as a diet, the problem is the act of feeding it that, and the expectation that that's going to be used to produce something and claimed by someone else or not. Or I'm not sure exactly about the claiming part. It's not my area of expertise, but I am fascinated by the idea that there is some sort of choice involved in what to train the model on. And I can see there being use as an artist for being able to, as you said, Harley, curate our own models, to not rely on like the one monolithic stable diffusion model that everyone uses, for instance, and to be able to come up, say, with your own style that you want to be able to generate from, and then using that as a jumping off point for another part of our artistic process or something like this. There's a great many creative possibilities, but I don't know if I even answered anything in the initial prompt that you gave me, but
yeah, I don't think even our conversation today can answer any of these questions. I mean, I think the best that we can hope to get out of this conversation is to have more questions, and maybe more interesting questions. So I continue to have these questions, and I think our job is to explore them and even point out that these questions exist. Because when I got into AI, I was just happily prompting away, and it took me a while and some reading to bump against those kind of edges of what is ethically acceptable, especially when I'm on Discord. You can see everybody else's prompt appear, and it's like, why am I seeing all these artists in here? And like, it's a bit tacky. It's not great. And also, I feel that the AI is not generating anything new. It can only regurgitate something that has been fed and just give it a little bit of Midjourney sauce, and then you get it back. But it can't really generate, or I'm going to put that out there. Is it going to be able to generate truly new artwork, or can it only make copies of copies of copies? We got a very strange asymmetrical apple that we did not expect when we were, the prompt was asymmetrical apple French, and we got some very unexpected results. So was the AI thinking, or was it just more tacky art? Who knows? Lynn, do you have an idea?
Well, I was going to say that I think I have seen things which I think are new enough. I mean, what's original in art is a pretty complex question anyway, and why it matters and all the rest of it. So I've seen some really interesting images which I haven't necessarily seen anywhere else. Technically, they come from something that already is there in the database, so technically they're not new, but they're certainly new enough to look at and interesting. But I wanted to say that in terms of biased data, just to go back a step, I think that some of the most interesting, well, some of the interesting artists in using AI are those who are looking at the data and really trying to think about data and to try to produce models using their own, usually using one of the existing systems, but labeling their own data, modifying data in ways that are really interesting. So I'm thinking of somebody like Jake Ewell, E-L-W-E-S, Ewells, who he does lots of different things, but he had an interesting project where he augmented a very gendered, kind of regular database of faces with drag kings and drag queens. And there's somebody like Stephanie Dinkins, who's a BIPOC artist who is working on really interesting projects where it's Black family history. So it's both using data that comes from from a Black social system, in her case, where it's also not so individual based, but more about families and social groups. There are all kinds of really interesting artists. Sarah Mehonas would be another one, a very well-known one, Anna Riddler, who you know well, who's done her own, who really wanted to emphasize the sort of the need still in some cases for human labeling of images, and certainly in the past, human labor that's hidden, all of these kinds of things. So I think there's just really a lot of interesting AI work going on that is not about producing an interesting image, for example. It's about looking critically at AI, or looking at AI in terms of its much larger effects in the social system and trying to intervene there. Somebody like Tega Brain, who is looking at the way in which using AI in ecological systems may be oversimplifying. So the kind of quantification you can get with AI, the kind of recommendations, the kind of results you'll get from AI may not, are not as complex as ecological systems. You know, even however complex they can be, if we start to use them on ecological systems, that's likely to be a mistake. And so she creates these sort of artificial, almost like little aquarium ecology systems where she feeds AI in and you see different results happening. So these are all, for me, super interesting uses of AI that are under discussed. I don't think they are so much in the AI art community, but certainly in the public, you don't see them. The public seems preoccupied mostly with images, and of course also with NLP, so natural language applications.
Yeah, thank you for these really great examples of artists who are sort of critiquing and creating artworks as a response to how AI works and not just making art with AI. Finally got my computer to work. And what you're seeing on the screen is a bias explorer. So you can go into Hugging Face, and what that allows you is to select a stable diffusion model, select one of there's a drop-down menu of several different kinds of professions and some sort of, other adjective. So I put in assertive IT specialists. And as you see, IT specialists are all white, male, certain age, mostly bearded. It doesn't matter if you ask Stable Diffusion 3 or DALL-E 2. And then I tried the same thing again with the assertive teacher, and we're getting much more women. In DALL-E 2, you only get women. Stable Diffusion is getting us some men and some people of color. But this is basically sort of lays bare the underlying data that is being scraped off the internet. And another very interesting project is by Sophia Noble. This is also based on her PhD work. So this is called Searching for Black Girls. And this was presented again by Eric Salvaggio, who's offering a wonderful course on sort of a critical perspective on AI images. And so I have just retested this morning, going into the Have I Been Trained website, which accesses all the Leon 5 data. And I just typed in girl, and this is what you get when you type in just girl. So lots of drawings and lots of lovely little girls. But when you type in black girl, you get a very different result. First of all, I'd like to rewind for a moment to show you that girl does not include any black girls. So if you're thinking about how that data is managed, it is all labeled and categorized. This is how AI works. For you to be able to generate an image of a girl, the AI goes into this data that has been labeled and categorized to make sense of what all these images and these bits look like. And then it becomes a problem that black girl is in a different bucket than girl. What is also very disturbing, all the squares that are grayed out were pornographic images. That's right on the first image, like on the first page. So I didn't have to scroll down to look for dirt. It was floating right up top. And when I saw it, I mean, I'd seen the Eric Salvaggio demonstration of it, and I'm like, I'll just try it again. And it really affected me. I find it deeply upsetting that this is the imagery that you get when you ask for black girl. And there's stuff that even didn't gray out that are sort of misogynistic and racist memes. So this is the material that underpins the AI image to prompt image generators. And this is why I call it the dance with the devil. I still do it. I still love to tinker, but I need to be so aware where that material comes from. And it needs to be critiqued and questioned. Sophia Noble originally did her work with Google Images, and she got Google to change what images are returned based on these prompts. But apparently, with Leon has not done this kind of work, and it's like one step forward and two steps back. So I just, go ahead. Have I Been Trained can be used for general prompts, but you can also upload your images and your artwork and see if your art has been trained. And this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about, Greg Rutkowski, who always comes up in conversations about using somebody else's style. So Rutkowski's work was a training prompt for one of the first models, I think, in DALL-E, and therefore is kind of baked in to the AI and this aesthetic keeps on coming up. So there's an interesting article in MIT Technology Review by Melissa Hickler that you may want to read. And I also came across a very interesting blog by Andy Baio, who looks a lot at copyright and AI. And this is an example of an artist's artwork. That is Holly Mangert. And her specific style that she uses for creating Disney movies has been used as a training model. So she has that problem where there's a lot of very substandard work that looks like her work, and so washes out her work. And in the conversation with Bao and the person who's actually creating the training model, she said she doesn't even have a legal standing because most of her work is licensed by Disney. So she doesn't even own the work. So who owns this work? So a lot of very critical questions need to be asked around AI. And I'm so glad that there are authors and artists who are looking at this, and us around this table looking at this as well. So I want to just not share the whole time, but talk a little bit more about how you see maybe AI integrate into creative practice and teaching and learning. Oh, maybe I will share one more thing. Sorry, this is just too funny. Hang on, I'm just going to get back into Zoom and share my screen one more time. I'm just going to fast forward to a slide that I saw. This is like the new promise. So this is a scribble diffusion from ControlNet, and you can literally make a very simplistic cartoon and then ask the AI based on that to create artwork. So for my money, I really prefer the drawing to the final outcome. I think it's really charming. But I'm coming from a background of art education. So now I'm thinking, we talked about labor and practice and what is a craft. So already, since we are sort of moved into making more concept-based art, there is in the art ed community always this little voice like, no, students can't draw anymore. They have no idea about how to do any analog work. Is this going to just get worse? Is it going to get better? Does it even matter? What is your take on this? Yes, Michael.
Well, I don't know if this answers the question, but I think of like the people who couldn't draw or couldn't paint or didn't have access to materials or cameras. I reached out to some AI artists because there's quite like a big community of AI artists now, especially like in social media, on Instagram, for example. There's whole communities of people using this technology. And I was really curious about that because I didn't see a lot of articles kind of talking about that. And so I reached out to some that I was following who had quite large followings, like thousands of followers. And, I reached out and I asked some questions. And I remember this one artist said something like, he could never draw and he never had that outlet. And suddenly he had that medium, he had that outlet that allowed him to create something that he always wanted to create. And I just thought, like, that's really powerful. And like, where's the discussion about those people, because, painting can be expensive. It's not available to everyone. Cameras aren't available to everyone. So that was one thing I was thinking about. And even my own experience coming into photography, I really came into photography through cell phone and Instagram, really. So, and that was, when cell phones got cameras, that was like an access, like for people who never had that access before. So I think about that. I was thinking about that when you were asking your question.
That's actually a really interesting angle. It's a democratization.
Right.
Or it creates more access to art. There is, I don't know if that's my next slide. Oh, that's not my next slide. I took that out. There is, there are several AI platforms right now. You're still on a wait list there, where you can, for example, shoot us, having a conversation around the table, input that video and then put a prompt like astronauts on the space station, and it'll just basically be us, but astronauts on the space station. So you no longer need to, light a scene or buy a set or get props. You can just create all this digitally. And another AI where somebody just basically piled a bunch of books and draped some cloth on it, and then that becomes a landscape. So you can sort of rapidly prototype something. And that is really exciting for me. So maybe there are easier ways to teach art to more people if we can have these tools. But I would like them to please not be on Discord with lots of questionable images of very booby girls, which we didn't have today. And so maybe it's just too early in the day. I'll try again at 8 p.m. So any other thoughts about integrating AI into teaching and learning or creative practice, Zeph?
Yeah, just to comment on AI art tools as we know them now, including this scribble diffusion idea, which in the stable diffusion interface is known as like image to image or sketch to image.
Yes.
That if as someone trying to produce a specific image, you're trying to achieve a lot of precision on like the style of the image and the color content and the characters and what have you. This is actually very difficult to get down to a fine detail. You can get close to an image that is what you're looking for, but to actually finish all the details properly, it takes a lot of effort, whether that's through running it through again and again, the image generator, or through going back and forth with Photoshop, fixing parts, and then specifying to only regenerate little parts of it, or all these little tips and tricks to work with these machines makes them, I think, a whole other tool for the medium. And in terms of including them in education, it's like you were saying, Michael, that in that case of the person who you reached out to, it was empowering for them. And so they developed a good relationship with it, and it's part of their practice. It doesn't mean that drawing is dead or anything like that. It's just different people gravitate towards different tools for different reasons. But teaching AI as an art tool brings with it all these ethical issues that we've been talking about. And so how can that be balanced is a big question, I think.
Yeah, it's a balancing. I just threw up a slide of a little field sketch that I did on one of my hikes, and then asked Midjourney. So it's because you mentioned initial images, so I fed that into Midjourney as an initial images and asked it to give me a Polaroid photo of that scene, and kind of got close. It still wants to look like a drawing. I still get very much a drawing vibe from it, but I see that the tech is still new, and if we just wait 6 months, it's probably going to be a lot better already, because I feel like I blink and there's a new version of something out, and it's getting smarter and smarter. So I think in initial images, there's a lot of potential.
I just had a question for Cynthia, because I don't know painting at all, and I was curious to know, is there, we're talking about like an artistic tool, artistic medium, and the ethics associated with it. Do you know if there's any kind of ethics around the medium that you use for painting? Like, I guess, I don't know what kind of paints you use or the various apparatus, but like criticality in the creation process there, is there any parallels with what we're talking about with AI?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I guess I'm trying to
like students use, let's say, if I think about my student, they use photograph, so they could do photorealism. So it would be a bit like, they could do photorealism from an old photo, or they could use AI, print it, and do photorealism. And then maybe the brush stroke, I could tell them how to make the painting better. Why not? Why not? I don't find the thinking process and the imagination very strong in that case, but I think it could really be used as a conversation in painting to AI. I've got no problem with that at all. I think it could be really in the conversation, but they would have to think about where the image comes from, what it means, how they can how they can discuss and be critical about using that image. I think if they just take it like the main public, they tell me, painting is dead, look at the beautiful images, they are so much better than what you can do, of course. It's a simplification of painting, thought, and arts. But as the idea that you were bringing about the AI artists, which felt empowered because they didn't have access to painting or drawing, but a phone and a computer is expensive too. It's extraction too from mines for the special metals. You need electricity, and you give all your data to the computer every time you use it, so it's not free at all. We think it's free because we're into that kind of mode of life, but as a matter of fact, it's expensive, and it's a system that we feed as if it was free, but it's not free at all. So I wonder how empowering it really is.
Yeah.
Especially every time you put things on Instagram, you need also the Wi-Fi, the electricity. So there's a lot of data, so it's a lot of energy.
That's a good point. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just like invisible,
Yeah, it's
so it's forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a good point. Yeah, sure.
I don't want to be traditional though. I would really like AI to be in my conversation in painting, because it's there, so we cannot just ignore it. So it's really important for students, they will use it. So I really want to think how it can be done in an intelligent way, how I can teach it. Let's say next year I've got a painting, dada, and poetry course. How can we do one project using AI and be intelligent and creative with it, also being critical?
Yeah.
It needs to be there, I'm sure, and it's important, and it's fascinating in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make work referencing it. You don't have to dive into the pool, right? You can stay on the like high board and just look in.
Yes.
And I think for your question, if there's any sort of unethical paints, the only thing that comes to mind is something called mummy black. It's a beautiful translucent black pigment that was made from actual mummies, sort of late 19th century, because apparently brown bodies were not seen as human and could be extracted for pigment use. And there's an anecdote of an artist who, upon finding out that mummy black actually had mummies in it, gave his paintings a funeral. So that is the only unethical paint that I know of. So Cynthia's pretty safe.
I don't want to overtake the discussion, but
No, go ahead.
of course, like if we think about painting, there's a lot of pollution. There's mineral which are really toxic. So in another way, it can be very toxic. And now students are really thinking of doing their own color, use sustainability, like recycling, just to try to bring that into the conversation. Yeah.
If you had a wish list going forward to AI developers, what would you put on it? In your wildest dreams, like let's say 18 months from now, when we're on version whatnot of all the Stable Diffusion models, or all those little startups who are thinking of things to do and hook us, what would you tell them? What do you put on their brief?
I think this last part of the conversation is really important, and you talked about ethics earlier. So, you know, the fact is that I guess most people don't have access to this technology, nor is data for them. I was going to say from them, also from them in these systems. So it would be to radically expand it's hard because you don't want people's data in the wrong way to be in the system, but on the other hand, a system that lacks so much of the world, you know, that in terms of what it references and also who it's available to is is super problematic. I mean, we do, even I catch myself thinking that, you know, the internet's kind of everything, and it's just not kind of everything.
Yeah, agreed.
I was just thinking about your last question.
Well, I think that they connect, right? On my wish list would be a more diverse data set for generating AI images.
Well, maybe this isn't for the people making the technology, but I often see these images called photographs in media, and I think that should stop because they're not photographs. And I think calling them a photograph is like a lie, especially since, you know, photographs have a sense of truth to them, whereas these images are like not true at all. So I think there should really be like a full stop, like let's stop calling them photographs because they're not photographs.
Like I said, we need more words for art. We also need more words for photograph going forward, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sitting, listening. Of course, we've all got like loads of things that we've been thinking about that come up and like, dang, like this is an important thing. And we've covered so many different topics here so quickly. I should point out, like Cynthia was my painting prof years ago. And we've worked together on a number of books over the years. But so I'm super happy to have Cynthia here today. And I think one thing about Midjourney I would want to point out is that these prompts can get so detailed. You can really direct it any way you want to go. There's so much ground that you can cover, and there's a default aesthetic to Midjourney, especially that they've really, like, you can put in any simple prompt and it's going to look like this illustrative kind of tacky look to it. I'm not a huge fan of Midjourney, but I can say that like it's incredible how you can really direct it and have your own somebody can have their own very specific look that's hidden away. And the one thing you can protect with this stuff is your prompt. Like that's the one thing, that's all you've got. Like a lot of the creators are like, well, what did you use for the prompt? And like, that's kind of the only thing you have left, you know, like your idea, what did you infer, you know? One thing about I wanted to say about like the language, asking about like, you know, words for art, words for painting, words for AI, and words for like these processes. I think it is important, and like something that that artists can especially contribute to is like, how does it feel? How does that feel to make this work? Or what are new ways of describing it and talking about it? And that's not outside of this, like this technical understanding or that approach, that computer science background that we don't have. So like interdisciplinary approaches to this, and coming at it as an artist and like contributing these new terminologies for like working with it and how that feels like, and you know, subverting the technology and how that can contribute to, you know, future development of it. Nora Khan is one writer who talks about this a lot, about coming up with a new poetics for artificial intelligence. And Gregory Shatonsky as well, he was at UQAM, he's in Paris 8 now, but he came up with a number of new terms for describing this. And one word that he uses a lot is hyperproductivity. And that's that ability, working with these systems, to generate way too much content all of a sudden. Like, I know if you spend an evening with one of these systems, you can quickly generate more than you're able to even go through afterwards. And never mind sharing this to people. Like, people don't want to see it. Like, I follow some of these Facebook groups where people post their work, and you see these incredible images, and you'll see like one like. People will load batches at a time, and it'll just be like, some of them no likes. You know, there's this devaluation of the image that is taking place from anything that's screen-based. And I think like one thing that like I find consoling, whatever, with artworks in this sense, is that I see painting and like the physicality of the image and painterly approaches and studio work having more value and like more importance, bringing back to like actual traditional methods of making art.
Yeah, I agree. This is why it was so important to have Cynthia here.
I think I'd like to really second that. Like I've been thinking lately that what's going to happen here is that things that look and feel very different from machine-generated the things we're seeing too much of now are going to come back, because people are going to really want that. I think especially maybe students, I think are going, there's going to be a reaction against it, just because it's overwhelming. And this may change, but it does feel like software. I mean, it reminds me a bit of point cloud art. Like for a while there, I just saw so many point clouds, and generally it just was not interesting. I mean, it must have been kind of interesting the first time I saw it. And I've since then seen a really interesting use of point clouds for a VR piece that shows volatile organic compounds in a forest, because somehow that made sense, really made sense, you know. But otherwise, it feels like software. And often when I'm looking at the stuff that's all the stuff that's coming out of AI, not all of it, but a lot of the stuff that is online, it's like, yep, you can see what it is. You know, you see where it came from.
Yeah.
I'd like to add maybe also like as an artist, maybe people from the outside, they think that we want to try to be technically perfect, to have as much skills as we can, but maybe I forget my idea. I would say maybe we don't. Maybe we don't want to be that perfect. Maybe we want to have just very limited language to play with, because the algorithm and the mathematical, like multiplication of numbers, it feels that you don't have choice anymore. It feels you're making art with like a plastic doll. It's like, it feels sometimes to be very limited can be, you can get a lot of freedom too. But even though I'd like, if I would have 3 elements, to have one as AI in the 3 elements of building a painting would be great. As a conversation, totally. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that you're making a good point. In art education, we call that a constraint that enables, right? You need a constraint as like that springboard, something that is familiar enough and open enough, but constrained enough that you're not giving somebody a piece of paper and say, draw something. You know, when we're sitting there at the computer, and a lot of people say, I don't know what to write. What prompt do I put, right? Because it's basically an answer looking for a question. Unless you have a research question going in, you know what you're doing this for. You're just sitting there and writing, you know, asymmetrical apple French, and great things come out. But it's, you know, why are we making these images? It's also a good question. Maybe anything else that you want me to ask you before we take questions from the audience? All right, questions from the audience? Yes, go ahead. Oh yes, so everybody can hear you. It's handy if everyone, including the audience members, have mics.
Thank you for the discussion. I have a quick question, and it kind of follows on from something Cynthia said earlier, which is that I think we're becoming quite familiar with I've heard it described as the enshittification cycle of technology, where new technologies, which has quite a cheap distribution cost, is introduced for free, and just long enough to get people hooked so they become dependent on it, and then people are monetized through it. And we've seen this, I think a lot of people saw this with Facebook pages, where businesses were kind of seduced to invest a lot of time and money into like getting followers on Facebook, just long enough until that was their main way of reaching people, and then Facebook suddenly starts charging people to use it. So my question really for the artists who are using AI and really like going all in on making this a part of your practice and your craft is, are you worried that the rug is going to get pulled from underneath you? And these tools you don't really own, they're all still owned by corporations. Those corporations are still, almost all of them, as far as I know, they're operating at a loss. So it's still to come how they're going to earn a profit. And the computational cost of running an AI model is so much more significantly higher than doing like a Google search or making a Facebook profile.
It's an excellent question. Who wants to take a stab at it? Go ahead. We still have a mic left.
Yes, I expect to have the rug pulled out from under me, I think. And that's why I don't think I'm going all in with it. I think I'm exploring it and I'm open-minded to it. And I want to see how it changes my relationship to the image, how it changes my relationship to the photograph, and my practice right now. And I just figure, like I'm in my first year of an MFA program. I think this is kind of like the perfect time for me to get into it and try it. But right now it's kind of like I'm in the dark. Like I don't really know where it's going to go. And I don't really have any expectations. And I think that's the safe way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that the enshittification cycle that you describe is dependent on capturing people within a controlled domain so that it can then be monetized or the rug get pulled out. But the AI image generation tools we're talking about, there are those that aren't owned in that way. Like Stable Diffusion, this one can be run on someone's computer at home. And the models are already out there and people are training their own models and stuff. So I think it's more likely, at least with Stable Diffusion, that it becomes its own sort of tool with its own community, which it already is. But certainly something like Midjourney, I can imagine how if people rely on Midjourney and don't have like a computer that can run Stable Diffusion, for example, that the rug could easily get pulled out in situations like that.
Yeah, I think that there's bound to be an open source community, like stable, and one that will grow, just like a community like there is now around Blender, which is an incredible piece of software that doesn't cost. It's ridiculous.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
I don't know how clear this question may be, but I just got to thinking, what's the line or the difference between art and entertainment in the world of capitalism? I kind of got on that because that was helping me to see the difference between the potential dangers of this capitalism system versus going into the future with art. And then a little extra part of the question was, with all these new generations born with the internet versus people who were born without it, what are they going to appreciate about art, or what do they think art is when they're fed so much? And will that last out in the future, or is it all changing?
Okay, two very good questions. I'm sort of paraphrasing. The first one had more of a capitalist bent. Are we talking about entertainment as in that using the platforms themselves as entertainment, or that we're generating entertaining images with it and then disseminating them? Yeah. Any perspective or thoughts on that?
The first one, I mean, I don't think the creators of these systems don't really have a sense of what art might be from the perspectives of a fine arts school. I think it's completely different. I think it is very much a commercial product that they're producing. I really see it being a tech, like these systems being able to generate exactly to one's preferences in the future. So I imagine people, like for better or worse, I see it where people will be able to generate this book, this movie, this song, whatever it is, exactly the way that they would find it, most enjoyable. As funny as like matching their humor exactly, or matching whatever aesthetics that it is. So like these base models or these base products by authors or artists that ends up getting tweaked by these systems to make it like the maximum enjoyment by the consumer. and that's an important word, like the consumer. Like it's very much like it stays in capitalist with these systems, I imagine. And that, yeah, it's harsh. It's like, if that is a reality, yeah, I don't know if it's it's a good future or not, but that's where I imagine it to be headed. The second question there, I'm trying to remember what it was. I thought it was interesting, but what was it again?
Do you want to restate your second question? Yes, so did the digital natives have a different relationship to art because they only know making art digitally, maybe from here on in? Yeah, but let's just maybe sort of discuss the first one, and then we'll get to the second one.
Yeah.
Cynthia, go ahead.
The first.
But I mean, maybe art doesn't have to be enjoyable. Yeah, but if it's a consumer part, yeah, then yeah, that's just what. So if it's uncomfortable, challenging your values, your thoughts, then there's still place for art. But yeah, if it's for entertainment or enjoyment, like I would say passive enjoyment, maybe it's a good product.
It reminds me of a conversation I had at a dinner when I was sitting next to a person who finances movies. And he actually doesn't do just the financing. So he looks at scripts and determines whether they are viable commercially to encourage his bank to fund them. So I was basically sitting next to the person who's responsible for all the sequels, prequels, and makeovers of movies. And I grilled him a little bit, and he just didn't see my point. Because that, unfortunately, we can already see what you suggested sort of playing out in the film industry, looking at all the, Marvel universe movies that we're getting served up, and people are hungry for real content and maybe want to see more indie movies. So I wonder if there's a parallel that is going to develop in art making.
Yeah, just to quickly finish my thought there following that, I'd be concerned about like a reality apathy in these futures, like with this new generations of artists, I suppose, and people reading the image or experiencing it, like this disregard for whether it's true or not, like where it's come from, if it's generated or not, same thing with language models, if it's accurate or not, like, so I think that could be a real problem in the future.
Yeah, Lynn, you were starting to say something.
I think I'm an eternal optimist. So I was just going to say that, if I look at, I could do a cinema analogy, but the game analogy. So when, games had a small beginning, but they've rapidly became hyper expensive and hyper huge and hyper realist and hyper. But what developed more slowly, but still really developed after that, was all of the rest of the stuff that you get in film. So all of the sort of more author stuff, the smaller team stuff, the more eccentric stuff, the extremely experimental stuff, the stuff that you can't play, that people complain about, that, all of that, it's all there. And I feel that that's just going to be the same kind of thing, and that there'll be open source communities, and there will be weird stuff, and there'll be, I just think it's all going to be there. And as an optimist, I would also say that this sort of reaction against too much virtuality, too much not materiality, especially in relation to ecology, the environment now, that there's going to be a big reaction, that the next generation will be, if we have to choose, I'd say it'll be the opposite. It'll be a generation that really cares about materiality.
I don't know why this comes to mind, but quite a few years ago, I remember I was in music technology at McGill, and I remember there was an algorithm that someone made at that time that could generate compositions in the style of Mozart, endless compositions in the style of Mozart. It was a while ago, but of course the same sort of media hype was going on around it all. Composers are going to be you know, extinct, and you know, it's the death of like music careers. But I don't know anyone who listens to auto-generated Mozart these days. And I feel like with these like big blow-ups in like how Midjourney has its own aesthetic that's very identifiable, like people can spot it and they'll get tired of it. So the endless entertainment aspect, I think, you know, it's going to get old pretty fast, and then we'll see more interesting things, hopefully. Although capitalism being what it is, we'll probably also see like hyper tweaked things that hit your brain in a certain way and make you want to watch more. But yeah, it's all out there, like you say, Lynn.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes, Nancy.
Is this on? Hi. So I'm going to try and formulate this without babbling. Apologies. So I come from art education as well. And also, I was a high school art teacher for years and years, 21 years. So I started before all this access to the internet. And what I found as I was teaching more and more is more and more reliance on the internet. So one thing that AI kind of scares me as a teacher and as a friend of current teachers is using as a crutch, right? As opposed to taking a risk with your own thoughts, with your own imagination. And I'm finding that more and more students are afraid. They're scared. I'm talking high school. They're scared to take a risk. They're scared to produce something that may not look good, or that may not be cool, or that may, I don't know, make them feel shame somehow because they're trying to be themselves. And I fear that AI will exacerbate that fear of trying to be yourself and trying to take a risk. And plagiarism, right? So this idea of plagiarism, you can give all these prompts, they're your prompts, but what comes out, is it actually yours?
Yeah, we discussed that.
And then the onus on the teacher to check, right? To check the plagiarism. That's another layer of labor for teachers that my friends or my colleagues are starting to talk to me about, not just in image generating, but in text. This is another task for them to check, oh, is this chat, whatever it's called, generated, or is this the person's actual idea?
Yeah.
So it's not much of a question.
For those that are teaching art, is this something that you're concerned about, that portfolios will be filled with what are not photographs, right? And coming from art education myself, I try to herd my students into that zone where they're uncomfortable, because only there can you be truly creative. So I call that the ugly teenage phase. First, you're starting off with a beautiful sketch. Sketches always look great. Then you're starting making your actual work, and suddenly your prototypes are looking all a little dodgy and ugly. But that's the good stuff, right? Where you're uncomfortable, where it looks ugly, because when you push past that, you get to the beautiful adult, the wonderful artwork. But what Nancy suggests, if you just cave when you feel that tension where it's ugly, because you're stretching, and you're not stretching, you're sort of short-circuiting your creative process by relying on AI tools. Is that going to be an issue, or can that maybe be a boost if you're stuck and you get yourself unstuck by typing random things into ChatGPT or an image generating program? What are your thoughts, Michael?
Well, for me, when I first started using, I don't know why, but sometimes I feel like I have no imagination. Maybe it's just like from looking at so many images, like every day, social media, I don't know. But when I started, that was when I started using DALL-E. That's when I was really excited, because I started seeing those images that spoke to me, and like that were creative in ways that I hadn't even thought of, you know, like putting, for example, like putting a light source in this position, like just like getting myself out of that like photography technical proper mindset. I found it helpful for me. It was like a part of my imagination, like in a box. There was like a conversation with it. If that helps. I don't know if that answers your question.
maybe as a art teacher, I don't see right now. I don't see so much use of AI in the painting. Maybe they use a lot of Adobe Photoshop. Sorry, I'm very low key in my software or terms, and I guess it's for the better. They use the tool which are at hand, and but I don't know why the new generation is still painting. Honestly, because there's so much input on like new media, phone, digital, being connected. I don't know why like nearly half of the studio arts department is painting and drawing. To me, I feel like a dinosaur, and it's antiquities. We paint with paintbrush and oil and toxic. It smells bad. It's fascinating in a way that the medium is still there. It's very fascinating. I don't know how it's possible. Honestly, I don't get it because everything is digital now, and my emails and everything. So everything for communication. I don't know why students and young people still want to paint. But they have a total drive
into our human existence. I think I think painting is what made us human. If you look at the ancient cave paintings, and for me, when I start a new project, the first thing is that I draw, because drawing for me is a form of thinking. And I found that in my research, I research transdisciplinary practice, and I interview scientists about how they think and create knowledge. And of course, art is a form of creating knowledge as well. And I find that one of the convergence points between art and science is the act of drawing. That scientists do a lot of sketching and drawing to help them think through concepts. And I think artists do the same. So creating visual images and drawing and painting, I think that's just going to be part of what makes us human.
I think that's right. And I also think something else. I think that, just to be mean, maybe, a lot of that comes from high school teachers and just a culture that is still looking at painting. I mean, there's not many people in contemporary culture that look, in contemporary society, that look at contemporary culture. They look at paintings, and that's what they look at, and that's what's taught in school, and that's what's art. So, I mean, I remember people coming in who from good high schools who that was all they just really didn't know about anything else, and that was what art was. And I still think that there's something very basic, especially about drawing, but also about painting. But I think it's both of those things.
Bettina, should we take a question online? Or?
Yes, that's right.
Can I just say that teachers should be paid more, because you're going to have to deal with all kinds of things. I think this is like a really big thing.
Second that. Thank you. And I think, yes, it's a great idea to have some participants online. I think, Linda, is that you?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Interesting topics, fabulous, like really fascinating questions. I think it's really important that we're doing this. I'm a fine art photographer. I graduated from Concordia quite a long time ago. In my quest to learn and to be open to new approaches, like I'm fascinated by AI. I'd like to learn more about it. I just signed up for Midjourney and trying to figure it all out. And I didn't grow up with computer. It's sort of it's not second nature to me at all. But I feel like we have to ask a lot of questions. And I think fundamentally as artists, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to have conversations like this, to think about how we could use this new tool in our work, and what are the sort of ramifications of using something like this in the world that we're in at this present time. You know, it makes me recall, as a photographer who's been working for over 40 years, I've been through like lots of major changes. This was going from analog camera to digital. That was very threatening. Going from a digital camera to a telephone as a camera, that's quite threatening. You know, lots of us asking like, how will we ever sell a photograph again when everybody has access to their phone and they're going out to take pictures all the time and call themselves photographers. And then Photoshop. I mean, Photoshop was huge because people asked, well, how are we going to be able to tell if it's a real photograph, and I put that in quotation marks, or something that's been constructed? And so, you know, I think about a lecture that I was sitting at, and there was somebody in the front of the room who there were experienced photographers, and then there were lots of students. And they said, okay, how many of you have been in photography for over 30 years? So I raised my hand. And they said, well, and a bunch of other people. And they said, okay, you're all going to be a bunch of dinosaurs very shortly. So they said, look around you. You've got all these young people who are like working on the computer all the time and have a certain sensibility that you don't have. You need to collaborate. This is an opportunity. You have an opportunity to be doing something exciting, new, and different. And I don't think there's anything scandalous about, you know, looking at AI images for inspiration. We looked at art books for inspiration. You know, I mean, I've always looked at paintings, painting books, of photographers, to think about sometimes a starting point and pay close attention to what catches my eye, and then move on with that. So I understand the fear, and I would say the fear is justified, but at the same time, I think that you know, as we climb out through all of these the possibilities and in this with this new tool that's essentially come out, and question ourselves as to like what do we really want to express, and how are we going to do this? I think ultimately, and it will take years, like these other advances, we will come back to a place where we can use the new tools and our imagination, our own personal imagination and approach to create something new and very exciting. I mean, I guess I'm ultimately optimistic as well. And so I just wanted to make a comment on that, because I don't really feel threatened. On the contrary, I really feel like I want to learn about it. I have ideas. I want to see how I could use it to create like a new series of work that would be exciting and something a little bit different. So I hope other people feel the same way I do.
Thank you for your perspective, Linda, and that's very interesting since you're also a photographer, and you know, like Michael mentioned that as well, like, you know, what is even a photograph, and this idea that there are dinosaurs at the table keeps being bandied around, and we keep on surviving and dodging the meteorites and keep on making art. But also what I find really interesting is something that Linda kind of hinted at, is that there's always seems to be this paradigm shift. Like she said, you know, we're moving to digital photography, we're moving to image editing, and each time it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? And there are always enough artists who color outside the lines, and sort of, I think what we're good at as artists is subverting the medium. We're taking something that was designed for one thing and saying, thank you very much, and I'm going to now take a left turn and do something else with it. So I'm glad that Linda is, you know, going like, I'm going to sign up for Midjourney and see what I can do here. And maybe I'll just make a bunch of tacky images, or maybe I'll come up with something really cool. So, you know, it's good to stay current, whether you choose to engage with it and make actual AI art, or whether you're just sort of informed by what it means that AI art exists in this world. So yeah, thank you for that input. I think we're getting really close to the end, but I just wanted to maybe give somebody else a chance to ask a question. I saw some tented hands going up. Or is there anyone from our chat? My chat broke down. Oh, we have one more? Yes, that's great. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I mean, by the time ChatGPT came around, Zeph and I had been co-teaching this class together and been in kind of a near constant weekly update of this has come around and this has come around. And when ChatGPT came about, I was like, oh, here we go again. But I noticed that the level of discussion, the reality, the kind of presence of it was something I hadn't expected. Like, as someone who'd been living with Stable Diffusion and talking this through for months, all of a sudden this became something that blew up in a way that I didn't expect. And this has me, and I wanted to ask the panel, because this has me kind of questioning, what does this say about kind of visual modes of expression in tandem and status of society, or the ways that Stable Diffusion and these turns to AI-based arts in the visual mode haven't produced the same level of hand-wringing as textual modes. And I'm wondering what type of reflection they might have, or kind of status as we debate. And I was thinking about, Lynn, you're talking about, these 4 different forms of practice. What might this say, or how might we interpret just these kind of markedly different reactions to very similar types of technology?
Actually, in response to that, can I just poll the room and say how many of you have used ChatGPT? Okay. And how many before today's workshop have used AI image generators? Okay, a few. Okay, it's fairly even split, because I wondered, how accessible these image generators are in relationship to ChatGPT. But it seems that maybe the audience is tilted a certain way because this is an AI art panel, but I wonder just how many people are even using Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. So therefore, maybe it's not so much in front of mind as ChatGPT. But what do you guys think? Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Myself, I began working with the DaVinci 2 model, like GPT-3 in 2020 when I got access to that. And gradually the other models that came out following that, and the fine-tuned with human feedback and learning for the ChatGPT, which is, a huge change and transformation. But I think the original models there are the ones that really stand out to me, like where they were entirely like the sense that was formed by the algorithm or the model is entirely on its own, and we were like discovering new use cases daily with that, versus the ChatGPT, which was really formed in like, okay, well, now you're going to do this, you're going to instruct us to do this, and you're going to pay attention to like reality, and then as far as compared to the diffusion models, the scale of token, the training data is like way lesser, of course, with the image models. So much smaller data sets. And then these are also, with the image net and the tagging. So like when all these have been tagged as like, this is an image of such and such, the Mechanical Turks, and all the labeling that's taken place is already, I feel like, infiltrated into the data set for the diffusion models. So whereas with the text models, there isn't this like labeling that's taken place on the literature that's been fed to it, and it's like all of human knowledge. It's all of Wikipedia, all of Google Books, tons of web text that's been scraped, and it's just like been fed to it and been like, okay, make sense of all of this, and it's gone and done just that, and it's made its own machine sense of it all. And I don't think we've seen that yet. I think that's perhaps something that we might see in image models in the future as they're scaled up, and maybe these problems around like the labeling and the bias that's put into them, maybe there's some solution to that, and we might see an entirely new image model in the future.
I think that's an interesting perspective. I think, I don't know, I think that the image models are pretty impressive. So I'm not sure if I'm just not sure of the extent of that, although it's really interesting to hear you talk about it. And there's been a lot in the press about the end of art, and so it may depend a little bit what you're reading most. But I still think, as I listen to you, that, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Perhaps there is more of a reception and a hubbub around ChatGPT 3 and 4. And I'm wondering if it isn't because of performativity. So, when you're talking to a chatbot, it's like there's a person there. There's all that performativity thing going on. And that's not nearly as strong a feeling when there's something there. It's like, ooh, this is amazing, you know, whatever it is when you see the image come out. But there's not like the idea, this psychosocial or psycho-emotional sort of idea that there's, you know, sentience, you know, in that sort of performative way. And I think maybe there's an emotional thing around it there.
Very interesting perspective. I love that we haven't even touched on that interface, you know, how we engage with the different AI generators, whether you just prompt it. And yes, ChatGPT kind of feels like it starts to know me the more I feed into it and try it to get it to do something that I want. But for me, writing is like drawing for me, like drawing is like thinking for me, and writing is like thinking for me as well. So by the time I figured out what I want ChatGPT to do for me, I basically have written it. So I have not yet found an interesting way to actually use it. Maybe one day. We are at the half hour, just a little bit past. I want to make sure that we all have time to mingle and maybe continue these conversations. We started, we posed a lot of great questions. I don't feel we answered anything, which is great. It's exactly what I wanted. I would like to thank this fantastic panel, Zeph, Lynn, Michael, Harley, and Cynthia. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon here. And thank you to the audience for coming in and asking really interesting questions. So I look forward to continue chatting with you over coffee. I see coffee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bettina, and thank you for the Applied AI Institute for once again congregating in ForSpace and activating this conversation. Folks on Zoom, I know there was so many comments in the chat. We were monitoring it, and you all were having a great conversation in there. So thanks so much for your input, and for those of you who participated, and those of you who asked questions here in the space as well. Okay, a quick reminder that this conversation is already available on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to revisit it, please join us once again on April 17th for the next Applied AI Institute event here at ForSpace. Bye, everybody. Have a great evening. First day of spring. Bye.
Yes, equinox. I think around